Greetings to all of you and welcome to Session 40 on the Gospel of John. I'm Pastor Timothy Muse, lead pastor here at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Alliance, Ohio. It's a joy to be with you today. Thank you for spending the time here, whether you are just listening or if you're listening and doing something else, whether you're in the kitchen or out for a walk. Thank you for investing in this. Thank you for showing your interest in it. It is by your investment that this work continues to move forward, and so thank you for that. And if you find that this is powerful for you, then please share it out there. Use the social media, the church Facebook page or Instagram or your Twitter account, whatever. Share this information out there. It is by it's our responsibility. It's our call to share the gospel, to share the word. And this is a really easy and powerful way to do it, by just sharing it out there. Share the word, share the information, get it out there for anybody and everybody to hear. And I'd love for you to tag me in it. Tag me. I'd love to see where you're at. If you're connecting through this immediately through YouTube, everybody's through YouTube. But if you haven't followed my channel or subscribed to my channel, please do so. You get all the information when things pop up like this, new episodes and new stuff that comes forward. If this is your first time joining us, then thanks for being part of this. Welcome to the series. Like I said, this is session number 40, so there's plenty of sessions to go back and listen to and get caught up. We have been walking through the gospel from the beginning, and we will continue to do so all the way through to the end. So we have plenty left to do. We are just getting into what is the second section of the gospel, and that is Jesus' private ministry with his disciples. So welcome aboard. And like I said, if this is helpful for you, then please share it out there. You don't have to stop. If this is the first time that you've connected, then you can follow along and listen to the session. But I certainly would encourage you to go back and hear the other ones and know what's going on. And if you've been following along, then thanks for coming back. Thanks for being part of this. Thanks for being part of the walk we've been doing together. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information will come up at the end of the session. You can reach out to me directly either through the Facebook page or through my YouTube channel or through email or whatever. Many of you know how to get a hold of me. So if you've got a question or a comment or something you'd like me to cover, please reach out to me and I'll do the best I can to do it. I'll do the best I can to fulfill that request and expectation for you. So thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of this. I definitely would encourage you to have the Bible open before you. It's always important to have the Bible open, to read it, to actually engage in the text and read what's going on, because that's primary. It's primary to be able to be in the Word. I've said this before. I'm not a big fan of memorization. I think we can memorize some things, but I think when you get too deep into memorization, all you're doing is taking words, sticking them in your brain, and then regurgitating them. They really don't have meaning or depth to them. They can if you work on it, but not usually through memorization. But when we learn how to navigate the tool, we live in a world where we can have access to a Bible. You can carry a Bible around with you wherever you go. And most likely, if you have a cell phone, you are carrying a Bible. You have access to a Bible. There's apps that you can download. There's apps that have access to books, library applications, all that kind of stuff. So it's all out there. So it's more important to know how to use the Bible and how to read the Bible, I think, than it is to memorize it, because memorizing doesn't work for everybody, but everybody can learn how to use the tool. So that's why I certainly encourage that you have the Bible open before you, that you're reading it, and as you're reading the Bible, then that helps you to be able to learn to navigate the Bible better. Okay, so have a Bible open before you. I don't care what translation or paraphrase. I use the New Revised Standard Version because that's the one I'm most familiar with. And that's, I think, the best teaching tool. Not always the easiest to read. And that's the thing. The NRSV, I think, is the best teaching tool because it strives to be the most accurate in its interpretation, taking from one language to another, and the word just went right out of my head. But anyway, you get it. Translation, there it is. It's the best translation, but it can be hard to read. It can be confusing sometimes. So things like the Message or the Good News Bible or the Living Bible, they can make it easier to read. But paraphrases take a little bit of liberties. Again, I don't think liberties that make them unfaithful. So I encourage, if you want to use them, use them. I think that's great. Just as long as you have a Bible open before you. It can be printed, it can be digital, it doesn't matter, just as long as you have a Bible open before you and that you're reading it and that you're engaging it. And that way then you can engage it with others. If someone has a question or what have you, you can open the Bible and you can show them. Biblical scholarship isn't just reserved for biblical scholars. We should all be able to open the Bible. We should all be able to read it and follow along and be able to know what's said and what's going on in the midst of it. Okay, so we're in the Gospel of John, and the Gospel of John is the fourth book in the New Testament. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John is the fourth gospel. The three synoptics, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then John being the fourth one, which tells a very similar story, but also at the same time has a very different kind of take or connotation. So we want to make sure that we're clear with that emphasis both ways. So John tells a very similar story, tells of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, but there's a lot of differences. And we see that, and we've been seeing that throughout the entirety of the gospel and throughout the entirety of the session. So we're in chapter 13. Chapter 13 is the first chapter where Jesus is alone with his disciples. This is a time for Jesus and the disciples to spend together. They're spending it together in a very personal and intimate sort of way, so that they're able to, again, spend this time, this learning. It's going to be on the disciples that Jesus puts the responsibility of building the church. So he needs to spend a great deal of time talking with them and sharing with them. And that's what this time is all about. It's called the farewell discourse in a lot of texts, or a lot of connotations, but it's also known as the interior work, or the personal work, the intimate work that Jesus does with the disciples. Remember, the first part of his ministry was his public work, and now we're in this private interior farewell discourse that Jesus gives. And we've just gotten done experiencing Jesus washing the disciples' feet. That's what he does in the upper room in chapter 13, begins with that. And then he goes on to talk about who's going to betray him. Now, Jesus knows this. And I think it's really important because we see, and I want to make sure that I reiterate this, we see Jesus, we know that Judas is going to betray Judas Iscariot. We already know that. But yet Jesus still washes his feet, and Jesus still feeds him. Notice that Jesus isn't trying to run, and Jesus also isn't, and here's the kicker, here's the big thing, and I think really we need to be very clear about this, because we as a people are kind of confused about it sometimes. Judas was not a bad guy, okay? He betrayed Jesus, yes, I'm not defending Judas' final act, but this didn't make Judas evil all across the board. Okay, we do read in the scriptures that the devil entered into Judas. So Judas, though he may have been a thief, and he may have handled the treasury a little bit wrong, he wasn't a bad guy. His final act defines him. So we know nothing about Judas Iscariot until he betrays Jesus. But there was something that Jesus saw in him that brought him into the fold. There was something that Jesus saw in him that brought him into the work. We don't know what that is, but Judas is not always just a bad guy, even though people want to make Judas out to be a bad guy. They want to make Judas out to be this devil, this incarnate. That is not appropriate. It's not valid, if you will, in the eyes of what we're trying to do or what we're trying to achieve. So we want to make sure, because we do this all too often, I think, in the world, where a good person does something wrong and now all of a sudden they're an evil person. Well, maybe not. There are evil people out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not defending any of that. But good people make mistakes. And we see that in Judas. So we saw that Judas, the devil enters into Judas, and that's where we left off last time. So Jesus, tells of, we see that Judas went out. That's where Jesus feeds him. Jesus says that somebody's going to betray him. He points out that it's Judas. Judas leaves. And that's where we pick up. And we're in chapter 13, verse 31. So that's kind of the back step. So that's where we pick up here now with the story. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You should have love for one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answered, "Where I am going, you cannot follow. You cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterwards." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you." Jesus answered, "Will you lay down your life for me? Very truly, I tell you, before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." All right, so here's the say. So they're still at dinner. They're still at the table. And Judas has just left. Judas has just left. He has just headed on out to betray Jesus. And Jesus says, "Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. Now the Son of Man has been glorified." Remember that the price on Jesus' head, the desire to execute Jesus, has been there for a while. The Pharisees just couldn't make it happen. They couldn't fundamentally make it happen. They didn't know where he was. They didn't know where he was going to be. They didn't know who he was. Again, and I don't want to sound, I'm not trying to sound, racist or anything of that nature, but Jesus looked like just about every other, middle-aged, Middle Eastern man. Okay, there was nothing distinguishing about him. He looked like everybody else. All right, and that's how he was able to blend into the crowd. I mean, he didn't walk around in fine robes of linen and gold. Okay, he looked like every other man. Because that's what you did. I mean, we need to realize that it really has only been within the television age and the digital media and the broadcast media age that people truly try to separate themselves in their looks so that they stood out. I mean, if you look at some of the early pictures of distinguished people, they all look the same. They all wore the same clothes. Now, they were higher end than the commoners, of course, but there was very little that distinguished them. Okay, Jesus blended in with the crowd. He looked like everybody else. Of course, he had his variations, and his inner circle knew who he was, but he didn't wear anything that distinguished him. All right, so unless the Pharisees literally arrested him while he was speaking in the temple, they weren't able to necessarily decipher who he was. And remember, these are pretty arrogant people, so they didn't really look at the differences in the common folk. They just saw common folk as common folk. Y'all look the same to me. And that really was one of the challenges. So when they finally were able to convince Judas, somebody, they were finally able to convince one of his inner circle. And this one was Judas Iscariot. Okay. When they were finally able to get a hold of someone who was going to betray him, point him out. And so we need to understand that that's what Judas was going to do, and that's what Jesus needed him to do. Jesus needed someone to betray him. Jesus isn't going to turn himself in, okay? But he is not going to fight back. And when he says, now the Son of Man has been glorified, the glory of Christ, again, we want to think that the glory of Christ is the throne in heaven. No, the glory of Christ is the cross, but he needs to get there. He needs someone to point out who he is and how he's going to get there. So he needs to get there, and the glory that God has set aside for the Christ is, in fact, his execution and his death. So that's why Jesus is saying, now the Son of Man has been glorified. The glorification of the Son of Man, the glorification of the Son of God, the glorification of Jesus is hanging on the cross. That is his glory. That is his throne. But God will also be glorified in him, and God has been glorified in him because God has shown the willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice for the people. The Maker has shown the willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice for the created. Unlike any other God, I'm using air quotes and small g God here, any other deity that ultimately, in the end, when pressed, would not sacrifice the self for the sake of the peons or the peasants or the created, but would ultimately destroy the created. God, the maker of heaven and earth, in sending the Son, Jesus Christ, not only to live in the world, but also is willing to show that glory by allowing that Son to be executed. That is the glory that is being referred to here. The glory being referred to here in Christ is the throne, and in God is the willingness to allow this to happen. Now think about it. Think about it. God, the maker of heaven and earth, has the power, and really, quite frankly, as I've said many times, has the authority to go ahead and wipe this stuff, wipe this all done. I mean, God could snap the divine fingers, and all of existence could be done. There's nothing that's written that says that God has to tolerate this. There's nothing that's written that says God has to accept this, but God does. God does accept it out of love and grace, and that is God's glory. That is truly God's glory. not in power and might and wars, but God's true glory is in accepting the sacrifice of the Son for the sake of the created. God's true glory is to see that this has to happen. And God allows it to happen. Does it make God happy? No, of course not. None of this would make God happy. It wouldn't make me happy. But God is willing to let it happen for the sake of those that he loves, and that is the world. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and will glorify him at once. So if God is glorified in the sacrifice of the Son, okay, if God is glorified in the sacrifice of the Son, if God's love and God's grace is glorified in the sacrifice of Jesus Christ and his death on the cross, then God will also glorify him. God will glorify the Son. Notice the Son doesn't ever take glory upon himself. That is not what it means to be the Son. The Son's glory comes from the Father. The Son never takes the glory upon himself. The Son always gets the glory from the Father, and the Father gives the glory out of love and grace for the sacrifice that the Son has made. That's the point. That's the work. That's the hustle, if you will. So the Son is glorified by God because the Son was willing to make the sacrifice, and rather than call down the myriad of angels that he talks about in one of the other gospels, but the Son is willing to die for the people, and because of that the Son is glorified, is risen from the dead, and that's the glory of the Father. The glory of the Father is resurrection. So the glory of the Son is crucifixion, the glory of the Father is resurrection. So if the Son glorifies the Father in the sacrifice, then the Father's going to glorify the Son in resurrection and will glorify him at once. So notice, again, and that's kind of what we talk about in this whole crucifixion resurrection thing. We're going to get to the nuts and bolts of it, but we're post-resurrection people. And if you're listening to this for the first time and you've never heard of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, then I don't want you to wait another 20 weeks until we get to that part of the story. What Jesus is talking about here is Jesus talking about God will glorify him at once. God will glorify him as soon as it's realized that he's dead. So that's why it's on the third day. And we'll get into much more detail about that when we get to the crucifixion and the resurrection in chapter 20. However, the resurrection, the glory of the Father happens as soon as it is acknowledged that the Son is dead, and that's on the third day. You can hold your breath for a day, you can hold your breath for 2 days, but you can't hold your breath for 3 days. That's the thing. And so we need to acknowledge and establish in the midst of history that Jesus is dead before he rose from the dead. Not just that he was sleepy or in a coma or hallucination. And that's why it's on the third day. That's why it takes 3 days to raise Jesus from the dead. Okay? But like I said, we're going to get into that in more detail. If you're hearing this for the first time, then please reach out to me so I can talk with you about the power of the gospel. Let's not wait until we get to chapter 20, because it's going to be a while before we get there. But the glory of the Son is his sacrifice, and the glory of the Father is his resurrection. Okay, so the Son glorifies the Father in his sacrifice, and the Father glorifies the Son in his resurrection. That's what he's referring to here. And he says, "Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me, and as I say to the Jews, now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come." All right, so he refers to the disciples as little children, and that's not meant to be a slight. You know, he's not speaking to the disciples as though they are young or small or worthless. That's not meant to be a slight in any way, shape, or form. It's just that their faith and their knowledge in this is very infantile. It is just starting to grow. So let's not think that because Jesus is referring to them or us as little children, that somehow that's a less than or a slight, because it's not meant to be. I mean, for one thing, when we talk about little children, we talk about an openness. We as adults, we can be pretty closed-minded. We can be pretty set in our ways. Children are very much open to possibility. They're very much open to differences and new ways of thinking. So Jesus is referring to them as little children because not only is their faith small, and that's not meant to be a slight, but it's meant to be a realization that they've only been in this for a couple of years. So, they haven't had the depth or the continued experience, but also, they're struggling with the whole physical nature of what's going on and the whole reality of what's going on. So they're just learning this, and they don't have the Holy Spirit. Without the gift of the Holy Spirit, faith really struggles. because it's manufactured from the self. It's not embedded and it's not increased by the Holy Spirit. So he's referring to them as little children. Again, and also he's been there since the beginning of time. So this is the maker of heaven and earth. This is not someone who is just, this is not someone who just came on the scene. So in reality, one to the other, they certainly are little children. He says, little children, I'm only with you a little bit longer. This is going to come to an end. Okay. And it needs to come to an end. And we're going to get to that. Jesus is going to open that up a whole lot more later on, but he's telling them, I'm only with you a little bit longer. I'm only going to be here a little bit longer. So now here's an important thing to this. And Jesus is trying to lay this out. So when he says what he says, they listen, they pay attention. And that's really an important key is, look, we only have a little bit of time left and I have a lot to tell you. So listen up to what I have to say. I'm only with you a little bit longer. I'm not going to be here much longer. So we need to spend this time together. That Jesus is trying to be very clear with the disciples. Again, he is depending on them to build the next generation of the church. He's depending on them to move this mission forward in a new and exciting way. So because of that, he needs to be as clear as he can with them and as upfront and forthright with them as possible, which is really important, but it's also really, really difficult. It's really difficult for them to grasp this. So Jesus, look, I'm only going to be with you a little bit longer. I'm only here for a little bit longer, and then I'm going to be going away. You will look for me, and as I said to the Jews, now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot follow. So when I leave, you're going to look for me. All right? But I don't want you to. And that's the thing. I don't want you to look for me. I want you to be doing the work that I ask you to do. I want you to be carrying on the mission that I ask you to carry on. This is a really important thing here that Jesus is doing. Jesus is saying, look, I know you're going to look for me. I know you're going to want to find me. I know you're going to want to track me down, but you can't. I need you to focus on other things. So I'm telling you what I told the Jews. This would be the scribes and the Pharisees and the leaders. Where I am going, you cannot come. You do not have access to this place. And it's twofold. First, he's going to go to the realm of the dead, which we're going to talk about again later on down the road. He's foreshadowing a lot of things here. He's talking about a lot of things here that will happen so that when they do happen, those who are around them get why they happen. So he says, where I'm going, you cannot come. You don't have access to this. First to the realm of the dead, and then after the crucifixion and resurrection, we have the ascension up into heaven. Your work is here in this world. Your work is here in this place. That can be so hard for us as humans. That can be so hard for us as Christians. It can be so hard for us across the board to grasp the idea that though Jesus is going off somewhere else, our work is here. Our job is here. We see Paul talk about this often with like Silas and Timothy and Bartholomew, in this idea that, look, I'm going on ahead, but you've got work to do here. And though it may not be glamorous, and that's really the thing, is we like glamour. We like the recognition. But it's like, no, it may not be glamorous, but it's important. And so the work to do is here. This is where you need to be. This is the foundation of the future of the church. And so I need you to be working on foundations. That's what this is all about. So that's what Jesus tells the disciples. I'm going to go away, and where I'm going, you can't come. Where I go, you can't follow me. It's not possible. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should have love for one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Okay, so I want to make sure that we're clear, and we kind of go back over this a little bit. And when we start talking about commandments, and commandments are important. Now remember, these people would have been Jews. They would have understood the commandments. They would have understood the expectation of the commandments. They would have understood the power of the commandments, and they would have understood the meaning of the commandments. The meaning of the commandments are this. This is how we live with each other. If we're going to live with each other in God's love and in God's boundaries, then this is what the expectation is. The expectation is we're not going to kill each other. We're not going to murder. We're not going to steal from each other. We're not going to have adulterous affairs with each other. We're not going to raise up other gods with each other. We're not going to speak poorly of each other. Okay, all that kind of stuff. This is the expectation that come from the commandments. Now Jesus gives a new commandment. And now the old commandments, look, you could, in effect, not care about your neighbor and still live into the commandments. There was nothing about caring for, lifting up, being involved in your neighbor's life. I just can't sleep with my neighbor's wife. I can't steal his farm. I can't kill him. Okay? I'm not going to speak bad about him. But my neighbor could live next to me, and I could have nothing to do with my neighbor. Nothing at all. And I would live into the commandments and expectations of God. I could have nothing to do with my neighbor and still live into the commandments and expectations of God. That is not what Jesus is talking about in the new commandment. The new commandment is about loving each other. So it's more than just ignoring or fulfilling the commandment knowing that it's not going to bother anybody, but loving each other, having love for each other. This is very different because love lifts up. Okay? To love someone is to want what's best for them. Now, for us, it's really important for us to understand that we have a very narrow interpretation of love. And in the Western world, and that is usually either familial love or intimate love, the huggy, feely kind. You can love someone and not like them. Because the expectation of love is not to have, relationship or what, you can do that. But the expectation of love that Jesus is talking about is wanting the best for the other. And you can do that while you don't like them. It's capable. I mean, you can love someone and not like them. Loving someone means you don't want the worst for them, lie about them, tear them down. You can love someone and not like them. And Jesus says, look, this is my new commandment, that everybody's important to each other, that everybody has meaning to each other. That's the difference. The difference is that everybody has meaning to each other. That's what it means to love one another, to care about one another, to be intentional about one another's well-being and upholding. And this is a command. Jesus isn't just recommending it. Jesus is saying, look, the new community that we're building, the new community that I bring, that I showed to you, that you're going to show to others, is built on love. The love that I have for you. Now, Jesus never let the disciples get away with anything. That's not love, when we just let people get away with things and not have any boundary or discipline. That's not love. But Jesus didn't humiliate or tear down or burden or throw out or anything of that nature, because that's not love either. Jesus taught and cared for, but he didn't let anybody get away with anything. He didn't let anybody get away with acting badly or producing badly. He didn't let anybody get away with anything. So he loved them, and that's how he loved them. However, he did hold them accountable, and there's accountability in love. And that's what he's trying to show here. That's what he's trying to give here, is this new commandment. Just as I have loved you, you should also love one another, so that you should care for each other, going out of your way to protect and communicate with and for each other. That's what you should do. That's one of the important parts. And the other thing, is this: by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So the basis of discipleship in Jesus Christ is love for each other, wanting the best for the other. And I think that's one of the best ways to talk about, kind of like communal love and non-intimate love, is wanting the best for another, even if that doesn't benefit the self. Okay? Wanting the best for another, even if that doesn't benefit the self. So I can want what's best for my neighbor, even if I don't get anything from it. Doesn't matter. I can still want what's best for my neighbor. Or my friend, or the person next door. I can still want what's best for the person in line in front of me to get my coffee, even though I don't benefit from it at all. Or I could stand there and look at that person, the back of that person's head, and desire that person to be crushed and struggle. Well, that doesn't benefit me at all either. I mean, I get nothing if that person struggles any more than I get if that person succeeds. So I might as well want that person to succeed. That's how we love each other. We tend to each other, even if we're not going to get anything out of it. Remember I talked a couple times ago about the washing of the disciples' feet. Jesus showed love to them, but he got nothing out of it. Jesus got nothing out of washing the disciples' feet except his hands got wet, and they probably didn't need to. So loving another. When Jesus says, love everyone. If just as I have loved you, you should also have love for one another. What that means is that we have love for each other. We want what's best for each other. And then everybody's going to look around and going, look at those two guys. Look at that group over there that are so disparate, tax collectors and fisher people and all that. But yet they want what's best for each other. What do they have? They have Jesus. What do they have? They have Jesus. More and more, I'll see people who don't have everything in life, who don't have enough money or don't have, the nicest car, what have you, but are just loving life and living life to the fullest. And how's that? Well, they have Jesus. They have this love. And love isn't bought, love isn't bartered, love isn't traded for. Love is something that swells from within. And we can love each other even if we're not going to benefit from it. And I think that's the true love of Jesus, loving others even when we don't benefit from it. And do this, and everyone will know that you're my disciple. So my discipleship, my kingdom is founded in love. Notice Jesus could have chosen anything there to instruct his disciples with, but he instructed it with love. He said that, if you have love for one another, then they're going to know that you're my disciples. And that is the hallmark of my discipleship, is love for one another. So then along comes Peter, and we love Peter. We need Peter. Peter for us is a really, really good guy, because Peter for us, he is our voice. Peter speaks for us because Peter is very earthy. He's very empirical. See, Simon Peter says to Jesus, Lord, where are you going? Where are you going? I don't understand this. I want a destination. I want a place, because I'm going with you, buddy. I want a destination. Where are you going? But again, Peter is thinking very earthly. Peter is thinking very human. He is not thinking he is not being able to see that the divine can crash the boundaries of human existence. Peter is thinking very human. He is thinking very human oriented, very human idea. Peter is not thinking divine at all. He is not interpreting or including divine at all. He's thinking very human. And that very human thinking is creating a very human vision. And so Peter, of course, he didn't hear anything that Jesus was saying. Peter is one of those people that gets caught on a word and he stays there. As a preacher, as a public speaker, it's really important for me to be careful on using some words, because some words cause people to stick on them. Okay, one of the things that and most of the people I speak to are adults, and they got pretty thick skin. I could use vulgarity if I so wanted to, and there are those in my circle who have heard me use it. And sometimes I do, but I'm usually pretty discreet in how I use vulgarity. And the main reason for that is because it's counterproductive. Because usually when someone uses vulgarity, that's where people stop. They stick. They don't go beyond that. So someone will use vulgarity in a public circumstance, and then people won't go beyond it. That's where they will stick. That's where they'll stop. Well, then you miss everything that comes after it. So if I'm giving a 12-minute speech and I'm 3 minutes into it and I use vulgarity, well, then anything after that is going to stop. That's where it's going to stop. The people are going to stop listening. Well, Peter's like that. Peter will hear one word and then he'll stop there. So it's like, I'm going away. Well, then that's where Peter stops. He doesn't hear beyond it, because what's the first thing out of his mouth? Where are you going? What does Jesus say? He says, little children, I'm with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. Okay, well, if we acknowledge that this is the maker of heaven and earth, if we acknowledge that this is God incarnate, then if Jesus says this, then we're buying into it. Okay, so what does this mean for us? Nope, Peter's like, where are you going? Hey, Jesus, where are you going? Those are the first words out of his mouth. Where are you going? Where are you off to in this world? Because wherever you go, I'm coming along. Now, remember this. Jesus, this isn't a time when Jesus could slip out in the middle of the night and go to Jerusalem International Airport and fly to New York City and disappear in Times Square. Okay, so Peter's like, look, you talk about where you're going, that we can't find you. Well, unless you feed us all something that's going to get us drunk for 12 hours and you start walking, it's pretty obvious we're going to be able to find you. Where are you going? Let's save this little hide and seek and just tell me where you're going. Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterwards. Okay, so Jesus says, look, you can't follow me where I'm going. If that's what you're trying to figure out, you can't follow me. Where I'm going, you can't get to, at least not now, because I'm going to death. I'm going to the grave. I'm going to the realm of the dead. You'll go there, my friend, just not right now. You'll go there, just not right now. You have to wait a little bit before you get to go there, because you don't get to go there right now. I do. Woohoo, look at me. But you don't, okay? You don't get to go there, at least not now. You will get to go there, but not now. You cannot follow. Peter said, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. So again, Peter is thinking very this worldly. He is thinking very earthy. And I think that's one of the reasons why Peter is such a good person for us. Because even though we want to think that we see more than that, in a lot of ways we don't. We are just as earthy and grounded and empirical as Peter is. We want that same earthy, grounded, empirical identity that Peter does. We want that earthy answer. So, Peter says, look, why can't I go with you? Where you go and then I can't follow. I will lay down my life for you. Now, great big words when you're sitting in an upper room all by yourself. Great big words when you're sitting in an upper room all by yourself, when you're protected. And Peter and the disciples they were protected from any kind of harm. They were protected from any kind of distress. But that's not always going to be. And so he's like, I'll lay down my life for you. Where are you going? I mean, you can't hide from us. You can't run from us. Jesus, tell us where you're going, because I'll lay down my life for you. I will go wherever you want me to go, and I will do whatever you want me to. I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus is like, will you lay down your life for me? Really? Because I'll tell you, when the time comes, you're going to deny me. When the time comes, you're going to deny me. You're going to deny that you know me. So Peter's talking a big brave, and Jesus says, no, look, you're going to deny me. Now here's the thing. Let us not, like Judas, let us not really get down on Peter. And it took me a while to learn this. It took me a while to figure this out. Let us not get down on Peter, because quite frankly, at the end of the day, we need Peter to deny Jesus, because if he acknowledges Jesus, he's going to be put to death too. And then we have no Peter. We have no early church. And the mission ends. The mission needs to move forward, which means that Peter needs to live through Good Friday. And he's not going to live through Good Friday if he plants his stakes with Jesus. And so he's going to deny him. In the face of overwhelming evil, Peter will deny Jesus, because that's what humans do. We are trained to protect our lives in face of everything. And so we would deny Jesus too. I mean, heck, let's be clear. How often is your life not threatened and you deny Jesus? Deny that you know him. Have the opportunity to speak his name and you don't. It's there. It's there quite often. It's all part of this whole sinful, broken reality. So we want to make sure that we don't tear Peter apart, because Peter is not as bad a guy as we want to make him out to be. Peter does things that we would like he did differently, but Peter is not a bad guy. Peter is not the bad guy we want to make him out to be. We need him to deny, one, so that we can see redemption. We need to see what redemption looks like, and Peter's redemption is really important to us. But also, we need Peter to live so that he can continue to carry on the church. We need him to be the witness to carry on things forward. So that's where that's at. All right, we're going to press on a little bit further because even there's a break in chapter 14, and chapter 14 is something that is used quite often. It's quite often used in funerals and the such, but it carries on. Remember, Jesus has just told the disciples that he's going to be leaving them in a little bit, and he's going to be going off into something greater, something bigger. And they're going to be left behind. Well, you can imagine that's not going to go over well. And that's exactly where we pick up in. This is a continuation of the conversation. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God and believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go there and prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and I will take you to myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus replied, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. Okay, so like I said, very familiar text here, very familiar in our walk of Christ, in our vision, particularly in times of need, but also a very familiar, promising text. And remember, Jesus has been telling them he's going to go away. And he is where they can't follow. And I was like, look, guys, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't find this news as bad news. And that's really an important thing, because a lot of times when we look at sacrifice or loss or change, we see it as bad. We see it as a negative. And yes, Jesus leaving them in their perception is going to be a negative, but he's just not like going off to bask on the beaches of Cancun for 25 years. He's going to do something important. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. So trust in me here, guys. Believe that I'm doing the work that needs to be done. I'm leaving you because I need to. I'm leaving you because there's work to be done that can't be done here. You've got to trust that I'm doing the right thing. Okay, think about this. Think about, again, getting back to that kind of infantile thing we talked about before. Thinking about a 3-year-old at home in the morning, complaining or lamenting that mommy or daddy are going off to work, having no conception whatsoever that this is necessary and vital and an important thing, not only because of the job they do, whatever their job is, but also because it brings in an income that pays for, they want mom or dad to be there. Don't leave. I want you to stay and play with me. Well, I would like that too, but I have bigger things to do. Trust me when I tell you that this is an important thing that I have to do. And that's what he says, look, guys, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't find this as a place of hurt or anger or frustration or lamenting. Find it as a piece of joy. Believe in God and believe in me that what I'm doing is necessary and important. Even if it doesn't look like it, believe that what I'm doing is necessary for the sake of everybody involved and for the sake of the whole. That's what he's saying here. Believe in God, believe in my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. So my Father's mansion, when we talk about heaven, we talk about, Jesus paints this picture of a mansion, a house with many rooms. Now, this would have been very uncommon. Most houses maybe have one room and a loft. So this would have been something really out of the ordinary. I mean, this is a grand palace. Okay, again, and they don't have HGTV that are going through these grand palaces. They don't have, photographs of the Amber Room or St. Peter's Square or the White House. So their understanding, most people's understanding of this is very imaginary. They have to create it in their imagination, what that would look like. And here's Jesus saying, look, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. There are many rooms. And in those, I'm going to prepare a place for you. What I told you, I go to prepare a place for you. If there's no room for you, there is room for you. Again, keep in mind, Jesus is rewriting almost this entire thing. Almost this entire idea, this entire identity of relationship with God is being rewritten in this notion that not only is God's mansion huge, but there's dwelling places for everybody. For everybody. And Jesus is going to prepare a place for them. Jesus is going, so his leaving is actually to go to prepare a place for them in heaven. He is leaving to set up their room in God's house. So why would you be unhappy? Why would you be troubled? This is exactly what you need, right? This is exactly what you want, right? You want Jesus to go and prepare a place for you because you want to reside in God's house. So he's like, look, don't be troubled. Don't be bothered. I'm going away so that you're going to have a place to live in God's mansion. That's what this call is all about. That's why I am going. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and I will take you to myself so that where I am, there you will be also. So there's that again. Jesus is looking forward and he's explaining what's going to happen that we see happen in the midst of the crucifixion and resurrection and ascension. Okay, so the whole notion of Jesus going up into heaven, dying on the cross, rising, ascending, taking care of things, coming back, drawing all the believers in, all of the history and all of the futuristic playing out is being laid forth here. In this, Jesus is laying out exactly what's going to happen, exactly what's going to take place, so that they know, and I'm going to go and I'm going to take you there myself. I'm preparing this place for you in God's eternity, and I'm going to prepare, and I'm going to take you there myself. So here is this this intimate connection between the present and the future, between the earth and heaven. The divide has been filled. The gap has been, the breach has been, brought back together. The gap has been bridged. I mean, whatever you want to call it. This is what Jesus is saying. Look, I'm going to go and I'm going to prepare a place for you in God's heaven, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to collect you and I'm going to take you there. And here's where it gets. Again, the disciples are working very much on this physical realm. They're thinking very much in physicality. They're not thinking through spiritually or metaphysically or otherworldly. They're thinking very spiritually. And he says, and you know the way to the place where I am going. You know how to get into God's mansion. You have the access. And I think, I think in a lot of ways, this is very human. The humans are very good at accumulating knowledge, but not very good at enacting it. So it's like there's a fear of failure. So if I sit and I accumulate knowledge over and over and over, and I accumulate all this knowledge, then if I'm still accumulating knowledge, then I'm never going to have to worry about failing if I enact it. It's like reading recipes for spaghetti. And you read 1,000 recipes for spaghetti, and you gather all of this ingredients. So you're working on spaghetti, but the fact of the matter is you're not producing anything you can eat. Okay? So you starve and you go hungry. And I think for a lot of people, that's where they are with God, and that's where they are with life. They have all these great ideas and they do all this great research, but they never enact it. They never put it into action. And therefore, no action means no product. Well, the disciples are all in this information gathering mode, but they're not quite clear about this whole action mode. But Jesus says, look, you know how to get there. Like we don't know. That's what Thomas says. We don't know how to get there. We don't know the way. How are we going to get there? And Jesus says, I am the way. There's no road or path, but it's me. I'm the way to get there. That's what this is all about. This is all about coming to me, and then I will take you beyond. Jesus talks about this in other areas, but they just aren't quite letting go of that human side yet, that humanness yet. But Jesus says, look, the way to get there is me. It's through me. It's believing in me, following in me, doing what I've told you to do, living out how I've commanded you to live out. That is how you get there. You don't walk through a secret door. You don't go down a secret staircase. You don't have, some kind of secret knock or secret handshake or something like that. You get to this place through me. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This is a huge statement in the church. But Jesus says, look, you want to get to God, you got to go through me. It's all about me. And not in an arrogant sort of way, not in a better than everybody else sort of way, but in a sort of way that says, look, I am the direction. If you want to get to God, you have to go through my teaching, my direction, because this is how God works in the world. Remember, what's that direction? Love one another as I have loved you. Care for the poor, care for the needy, care for the hungry. Show respect. Those are the ways that people get into heaven. Those are the way that people get to the Father. You want to get to the Father, you have to go through me. You have to do what I do. You have to teach what I teach. You have to show what I show. Again, and we've kind of lost this idea because somehow we've come up with the idea that you can get to the Father without doing the way of Jesus. But that's just not it. That's not the way it's going to be. That's not how it works. So, you know the way, the place I'm going. And Thomas, we like Thomas. Thomas is another one. Thomas is like Peter, only a little bit more thoughtful. He's like, we don't know how to get there. How are we going to know the way? And Jesus says, I am the way. Thomas is trying to be practical, but he also is trying to be very supportive of this. And Jesus says, if I am the way and the truth and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me. Now, that sounds very limiting, and it is. But when we talk about Jesus, we need to acknowledge that Jesus is more than just what we can see and more than just what we can read. So, if Jesus is going to open up the doors to heaven, then whoever he opens them up to, we don't question. We're just happy that he opens them up to us. We're thankful that we have a way into heaven, even if we might be looking at someone that we don't think deserves to be there, because it's not about us. It's about what God thinks. It's about what God does. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I am the one to whom is necessary in order to get into heaven. That's what that statement is saying. I am the one. No one comes to the Father except through me. I'm the one that determines it. I'm the one. And that kind of, looks towards his seat in judgment, his seat in power, that everybody will stand before the Savior before they are entranced into their place of love and hope. So that statement says that kind of alludes to his place in judgment. So then he goes on to say, if you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you know him and you have seen him. So Jesus is really connecting himself to the Father, that they really are one. Remember, we talk in the Trinity, one God, three persons. But Jesus doesn't do anything without the Father. Jesus and the Father are very well connected. And that what Jesus is doing represents the Father. That's what the point is. What Jesus does represents the Father. Jesus doesn't do anything that represents the self. What Jesus does represents the Father. So he's showing the Father. This is the Father. What I do represents the God who sent me. That's what Jesus is showing. That's what he's talking about. All right, I'm going to leave it here. We're going to pick up a little bit more on this next time when we talk about, Philip, and we're going to get more into the Father. I don't want to really kind of jump the shark. But as always, if you have any questions or any comments, you can reach out to me. My contact information will be up at the end of this episode. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being part of this, and we'll talk to you next week.